Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Jesse and the boys. Thinking about April down in Florida, and so I want to keep her in our prayers. Thank you all for coming out this morning. I think this is working. It sounds good. You guys hear me okay in the back? All right. Okay. Well, we are in finishing up lesson 2. We were in a section of Solomon asking for wisdom, and we're going to be starting on question 8 here in just a second. Picking up on question 8, we got a little bit into it last week. Okay, so as we get started, we want to go through the time periods once again as we continue to keep these things in mind as to where we are in our study through the Bible. Before the flood, scattering of the people, the patriarchs, the Exodus, wandering in the wilderness, invasion and conquest, the judges, the United Kingdom, the divided kingdom, Judah alone, the captivity, return from captivity, the years of silence, the life of Christ, the early church, and letters to the Christians. Okay, so this is where we got to. We're in again in the United Kingdom part of all of that, and we were working on question 8. About what the correlation could be, what correlation could be made between Solomon's request from God and what Christians might pray for today. And James 1 and 5 was used there as an example. But I wanted you to think about some things, and you've been thinking about this all week, I know. And that is, what was Solomon's motivation in making the request that he made to God? What was the request that Solomon made? Okay, and so that request was tied up in what kind of a motivation? What Solomon asked for? What was the motivation that was driving him to ask for this, as opposed to other things that other people might have asked for? Go ahead, Jesse.
Well, one thing I'm thinking of is he just felt overwhelmed or inadequate, at least, with, as he expresses in verse 7 of 1 Kings 3. You made your servant king instead of my father David, but I'm a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. Your servant is in the midst of your people, and you've chosen a great people too numerous to be numbered or counted. And so he recognized in view of that, what I need most is your help, your wisdom, your guidance.
So, application to us today, would that be a good thing to start off as far as an attitude when we go to God in prayer? I mean, he's asking for, let me use the things that you give me, God, for the good of others and not for myself. And that is a wonderful way to look at that. There are some other things. It ties into the whole big picture about the way God made us and the way he designed us. And that there's a similar process which is in the what I like to call the mystery of giving. And the reason I talk about a mystery here is because the Bible talks about the mysteries. Why is it that God would make something to operate in a certain way, and yet the world has no idea? Even though it's as plain as day, and example after example of how things work, the world continues to go in the opposite direction. And one of the things that this works for is the idea of giving, and this having the right attitude when you're giving. And of course, we have examples of this in Luke chapter 6, verse 38. This idea of, by the standard that you measure it, it's going to be measured back to you in return. And how did that come out in Solomon's case? How did that principle here work for Solomon? Did Solomon get the wisdom that God promised him? Sure he did. But what else did he get? Yeah, he didn't ask for that. And yet God blessed him with that. And so, again, the idea of the mystery of giving is that you give, but you don't give to get. But when you give properly with the right attitude, you get so much more. Well, how does that? That's just the way God made it work. And so, and again, we see it in Matthew chapter 6, in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is talking here about the idea of giving is something that's to be done in secret, not for your praise, but who gets to see the giving that gets done, giving that is done in the proper way? God gets to see it, doesn't he? Yeah. God can read our hearts. He knows the reason that we're giving and the attitude towards it, plus the results that come out in that. So again, do you see some similarities in this? When you do things for the right reason, in accordance with God's word, then the blessings end up coming back almost as if by magic. I mean, that's the way the world looks at it. It's just like, oh, you're just lucky. You know? No, it's the way God made it to bless his people. So let's take a look at this, another bonus question associated with Solomon and asking for wisdom. What conditions did God place on Solomon for his blessing to continue? Now take a look at this right here in 1 Kings 3 and verse 14. And notice the red lettered words here. And if you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and commandments and all the David, then I will prolong your days. Okay. Let me ask you this question. Did God fulfill his promises that he gave to Solomon? Yes, he did. What promises did he promise Solomon that he fulfilled? Okay, so he is going to get the wisdom. Did Solomon get the wisdom? Yes, he did. Okay. He also promised him what else he was going to get, and he got all of that, right? But this is conditional, this one. If you walk in the ways, keeping my statutes, commandments as your father David did. And the big difference here, if you note that part of this condition was to walk as did your father. Okay? And now you can remember, we talked about it earlier, and Jason spent a lot of time on it in talking about David last quarter. David's heart. Remember David's heart, and remember his attitude, remember his reliance on God. Did Solomon meet this condition? For a while he did, yeah. For a short time. And then the rest of the time we're going to be talking about and what the results of that was. So again, we have to, when we're looking at the things that God wants us to do, we have to keep in mind these ideas, and that in most cases, there's a condition that's associated with it. As in any good covenant, you're going to have two sides of that covenant. And either side could break the covenant. We know God, in the covenants he makes, never breaks his side. But somehow, that other side keeps getting broken. And how does that happen? Okay, so let's take a look at this other bonus question associated with this before we leave Solomon's wisdom part. So what is the condition that God set in James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8, concerning our prayer requests? Okay, so this is the application that we started with question 8 with, and how does this apply to us? And you notice in the phrase, but if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. Isn't that what Solomon was asking for? Okay, so this applies now to us. Let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without doubting. For the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed, and on it goes there. So again, we see the condition that's set up by God, very clearly stated. And so, how can we apply that to our lives? Do you, go ahead, Shirley. Yeah, the same way. Do you believe this? Do you believe this to be true? God said it's true. God created us and made it so that it is true. This is truth. And sometimes we don't act like we believe that that is the truth, but it is. And so Solomon had to figure out the hard way that this is a truism here. So let's go on to the two women and a baby. Question 9. In the example of Solomon's wise judgment regarding the child and the two mothers, what was evident to the people who heard about this? And this goes back to 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 28 as a reference. What was the reaction of the people when they heard the story that came out from the throne room about these two women and the baby? And you all remember what happened with what was the final outcome of the two women? They had a choice between the child getting cut in half and half given to each, or the result of Solomon's wisdom given by God, where he found out who the true mother was. What was the reaction of the people? And is this a reaction that would be surprising to us? Or would it be something that you could just as easily see today on something like this? Francis?
1 Kings 3:28.
Mm-hmm.
For they saw that the wisdom of God was in him, justice.
Yes, they recognized God's work in this. And what was their physical, emotional reaction to that realization? They feared the king. That's right. Why did they fear the king? And why would this create this feeling of fear? Fear could be one of two things, right? Or it could be both. There's fright, fear, and then there's, I hear it back there, respect? Yeah, yes, yeah. So, and you can have both. As a matter of fact, it's a healthy fear to have both, because sometimes that the negative side of that motivates us to do the right thing at times. So, why would this create this feeling of fear?
Just recognizing the incredible insight and understanding that this king has into people's lives, and even their motives or true motives, or
Mm-hmm.
women and who's their real mother. They recognize that has to come from God, what he's exhibited here. God's with him.
And the truth came out, didn't it? I mean, there was one woman that was lying in this situation, and then there was another one that was not. And the truth came out. Now, there's two sides of God, right? There's the mercy side. What's the other side? Justice. So, think about this. And before we get to question 10, who would be afraid of a just God?
The ones knowing that they're not doing right.
The ones who are not doing right. Isn't this why governments were established as an institution by God? To put fear into the wrongdoers? Yeah, I mean, that's a basic principle of what God has set up there. So in Hebrews 11, verses 26 through 31, that section there, it talks about a righteous judge. And a righteous judge is going to put fear into those that are intent on doing wrong. And the people could see that Solomon was going to get to the truth on this. And so that put a healthy respect and a fear, as it should have, in their eyes there. So let's go on to question 10 now. 1 Kings 4:25 says, "And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and his fig tree." Sounds nice. So explain, what would this mean in today's terminology? This is kind of a phrase, a way of putting something that describes a feeling and a condition in the country at that time. Okay, so safety would be involved with it. What else would be involved in this feeling? Just safety? You can feel safe in prison. Total security, right? 3 meals a day, safe home. But what? Prosperous, yes, prosperous. Were they a prosperous people at this time? Wealth beyond imagination, it was there. Were they happy? Yeah, all of these things were associated. It gives you a feeling of what the feeling was like in the country at this point in time. This feeling is going to change very quickly. It changed quickly to get to where it is, and it's going to change quickly, as we're going to see here in just a second. So, final part on this, and we'll close up the lesson, and that is this final bonus question associated with Solomon's wisdom. How does God describe Solomon's wisdom and discernment? If he was going to quantify, if we could quantify, count up, or enumerate all of how Solomon's wisdom and discernment would be looked at compared to everybody else, how did God describe it? And this description is used many times by God in the Bible when he wants to talk about something. He either talks about look up, Abraham, and see the stars in the sky. God doesn't say that in this particular case. He says, look and see the what? Greater than any, and it was by how much? It was as if it was like the sand in the seashore. I like to think of the Panama City sand, which is the really small granule, not the big chunky New England stuff and everything. We're talking about innumerable. You can't count it, it's so great. And again, God uses a lot of pictures to try to help us to understand. And so that's where Solomon was at this point in time. Okay, so let's leave Solomon and this question for now, and let's go on to the next lesson, lesson 3. Okay, lesson 3, we're going to be talking about Solomon completing and dedicating the temple. Now, some of the things that are going on, there's not a lot happening. This isn't over a large period of time. We're in a short period of time that this is happening. But once Solomon's kingdom was established, remember last time we talked about all the different things that were happening and the rebellions and things that were going on. And God was going to give Solomon a period of peace so that things could get done. And that, in fact, is once things settled down, then Solomon began the construction of the temple. About 4 years after Solomon got into the kingship, into the beginning of his reign. And the first person that he went to was a king from the city of Tyre, whose name was Hiram. And we're going to talk about Hiram a little bit later, so we'll just pass that on right now. Other than the fact that Hiram was very much involved in helping Solomon put the materials together for the temple. And so we're talking about precious metals and timber and all these different things were going to have to be used in the temple. And so Hiram was a big part of that. The temple took about 7 years, a little over 7 years to build. And so by the time it gets done, we're into about the 11th year of Solomon's reign. And then the rest of the quick story that goes on is is told is that Solomon then spends some time building a palace for himself. He built a palace then following that for his Egyptian bride. And so we're talking about over half of Solomon's reign was spent in building just those three things: the temple, his palace, and all of that for his bride. So then the story goes into the idea of how about all of the things that have to be used in the temple. And so we're introduced to somebody else named Hiram, who's also from Tyre. So don't get the two confused. This was not the king down there pounding brass. This is a different Hiram who was a half Jew and half Gentile. And so as a result of this man was somebody that worked in bronze, and he was really good at it. And so he's the one that worked all of those different things, the metal working that had to go on for the things that needed to fill in all the utensils, the interior, working the gold and all these things inside of the temple. And then once the temple was completed, then the priests got the Ark of the Covenant, got the tabernacle pieces that were out there at Gibeon, and all of that was brought to the temple. They brought it into the finished temple, and once they put it in there, once the Ark of the Covenant went in, then similar to what happened when the tabernacle was finished, God's presence then came into the temple, and showing that now the completion of Solomon's work with that was done. And then there was a lot of information on a big, long 2-week feast that went on and all that. So all that's covered in this particular section as we go through, just so, again, we keep a bookmark in what's going on chronologically. All right, so let's go ahead now and look at some of the important applications that we're going to try to get from this lesson. Now, Solomon was very quick to pour his riches back into the house of the Lord and the Lord's service, okay? So one of the things we can apply and look to do out of this is the idea of using what we have and returning to God with that and doing it with our free will and making those things. This is how the work of the church is designed to get done. We use our talents, we put it back into the service there. And then the second application is when we draw near to God, he will draw near to us. And we got to keep that in mind. We're going to see examples with Solomon where he's going to get away from that. He's going to start walking in the opposite direction from that. And all of those good things are going to start reversing themselves. And so, again, so it's a warning for us. And the third thing is make sure that what is important to God is important to us. Now, that assumes that you know what is important to God and everything that's associated with gaining that knowledge and having the right attitude and prayer and all of that is part of that. So we want to make sure that we know that so that can be a priority for us. Without the knowledge, again, we're going to have a hard time trying to make those good decisions. Now, thanks to Ken, he went out and you can't read all the little stuff, so yeah, I just wanted to show you the picture here. Ken found a good picture of the artist's depiction of the Temple of Solomon here. And what I want you to notice is all the yellow stuff inside of the temple. That's all gold overlay. Everything that was inside of the temple that you could see, touch, was gold. Now, you know, the Bible talks about heaven having streets of gold. I mean, we're talking about God depicting for us something that for us is like the meaning of value as far as the, wealth and physical wealth is concerned and everything. You can't get much higher on that standard than gold. Now, the thing that's interesting, and you probably noticed it in your study, was that there are a lot of, unlike the tabernacle, which all the drawings you see, there's some slight differences and everything, but basically it looks the same every time you see a different picture of the tabernacle. And yet, when you look at, try to figure out what Solomon's temple looked like, there's a lot of generalizations, but there's not the specifics that are there. And the question that I had was, why is it difficult to visualize the temple? What's so hard about this? It's a building, it's got four sides to it with a roof and everything. So what was it, the instructions that were received? Compare the tabernacle instructions with, for instance, the instructions that are given for the temple. Which one was more detailed? The tabernacle, by a lot. There's multiple ways of the tabernacle was described in its building, in its structure, in the checking of the building. When the structure was being checked by Moses, God's going through and he's listing all the stuff that he's already listed that's there. And like, okay, if you're reading it, you're going, I got it the first time. Now you're giving me the second time and the third time. And so the instructions were very different. One of the ways of looking at this was the tabernacle was whose plan? Whose idea was the tabernacle? Who had the idea to have a tabernacle for the place where they're going to be worshiped? God did. That was God's plan, wasn't it? And there's a lot of detail in it. What if somebody had messed up part of that plan? What would have happened to them? Well, you saw Nadab and Abihu, they put a slightly different incense in the incense altar. And what happened to them? Gone immediately. But so there's a difference in way God, when it's God's plan, how he looks at it and obedience to it. Take a look at the temple. Who asked for the temple? Did God want the temple? Did God ask David to build the temple for him? Did God ask Solomon to build the temple for him? Who wanted the temple? Well, I heard over here. David wanted the temple. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is that in the tabernacle, if you go to Exodus chapter 40 and verse 16, if you turn over there, notice that it says, and it's a very specific phrase, so Moses did these things according to all that the Lord had commanded him, so he did. Okay? I challenge you to find that kind of phraseology when it's talking about the temple. There's only one place, and it's in 1 Chronicles 28 and verse 19, that talks about this in a positive way when it says, all this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me all the details of this pattern. That's the only time that it's talked about as far as that's concerned. Now, again, part of the understanding of what we're talking about here goes back to an understanding of what the inspired writers were trying to get across. In the Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, if you noticed as we were going through here, you see a lot more of the warts and the moles are showing up on the kings and the people in there. Whereas when you're reading the Chronicles, both 1st and 2nd Chronicles, it's all the good stuff that's happened. A lot of shorthand, and so again, Bible study knowledge, the the idea is inspired writers are writing about the same thing from different angles, okay? And the Chronicles, their job was to look at the positive aspects of the kingships. The First and Second Kings, they just laid it out there. Here's what happened, good and bad. It's all in there for it. So this one positive statement is the only thing we have, and it's in Chronicles. That's David saying, "Hey, God gave me this plan, and he approved all the details of the plan." But not one time was there any kind of a phrase in there where either David or Solomon did these things according to that which God had commanded him, so he did. Those kinds of phrases where they're for the tabernacle, they're used over and over and over. I counted over 30 times. There's like 15 times in one chapter. But for the temple, that's lacking. Who asked for the temple? It was David. So here we have a circumstance of God permitting something to go on that, in fact, he didn't direct to happen, but because of the individual, in this case, David's good heart, he's allowing it to occur. In other places, because of the hardness of their heart, God allowed it to occur, like with divorce, for instance. And so again, these are things we want to keep in mind. So the instructions can help us to understand this concept. How about archaeology? Is archaeology going to be any help in trying to figure out what the temple looked like? What happened to the temple? Destroyed. What happened to Herod's temple, which didn't look anything like Solomon's temple? Destroyed, 70 AD, with the destruction of Jerusalem, along with all their records, along with all their plans, along with all their genealogies. All that was, so archaeology is not going to be any help with that. How about the value? Was there a difference in the value of the tabernacle versus the temple? And watch out, it's a trick question. If you had to look at the tabernacle and about what its value would be, where would most of the value be of the tabernacle? Again, watch out, it's a trick question now. The value is on the spiritual side, wasn't it? What was it that the tabernacle represented for the relationship between God and his people? Francis?
Where the presence of God was at.
Yes. The rest of it was, there was a little bit of gold here and there, but not like the temple. Where was the value in the temple? In the physical, exactly, yes, by a huge amount, tremendous amount. And so again, we had the idea here of, and I want to just, in conclusion on this point, because I don't want us to forget this. Remember how we got here. Think about how the journey that we've been on, because this period of time is talked about as being the height, the zenith, the highest, the greatest point in Israel's history right now. This time we're talking about. The world would tell you that this is the greatest, the most spectacular that Israel was ever going to get. The top of the top, okay? But look how we got here, and I want you to notice the change. Israel wanted to be like their neighbors, didn't they? Remember? Back at 1 Samuel, give us a king so that he can go out and fight for us and we can be just like everybody else. Did God warn them about what a king would do? Very, very clearly. We're not going to have time to go through the scripture, but on 1 Samuel 8, verses 4 through 9, Yeah, very, very strongly and clearly about what a king would do. What happened to the tabernacle and the ark? We talked about this already. What happened to the tabernacle and the ark? What's been going on for the last 400 years, 480 years with the tabernacle and the ark before they got put into the temple? In general, where did they spend some time? Where did the ark spend some time? With what? Wilderness. In the wilderness. Where else did they spend some time? From the time they got into Canaan. Okay, they spent some time at Shiloh. That's where God wanted the tabernacle to go, and it spent some time there.
It was a means of the enemy getting what they felt was their strength. It was a pain and stay with the enemy.
Who actually had the tabernacle for a number of years? The Philistines, the most hated ones of all time. That didn't work out good for them, and they sent it back. But so they've been all over the place. Is that what God wanted? Did God design it that way, Norm?
The tabernacles remained at Shiloh. The Ark of the Covenant, they kept taking out like it was a token they could use to fight things for them, and that's what spent time all over the place.
So-
Arguably, the most valuable single piece of the tabernacle would have been the Ark, being the largest.
Right.
Gold, but regardless of that, it went out and about, and it wherever it went, and it spent a long time outside of the tabernacle. We're talking through the reign of Saul,
Right.
all the way through, partway through the reign of David, before it finally made itself back to the tabernacle where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and so how much of God's plan for his worship was going on during those 400 plus years? How much of it was being done correctly, the way God would want it to be done? A lot. Following God's plan all the way through that whole time period. Been surprised if they had a day that they did the right thing. Yeah, and then you follow that with Saul's. Give us a king, and you follow it with Saul's disastrous reign. And did God give them what they asked for when he selected Saul? Did God give the Israelites what they asked for when God selected Saul to be king? Absolutely, they got exactly what they asked for. Yep. And so David, in his good heart and his good intentions, is kind of an anomaly in this period as we're going through. And let me ask you this in regard to David. And this is in 2 Samuel 7, starting in verse 1. I want to read this as we're getting close to the end here. And I want to ask you the question, are good intentions enough for God? In 2 Samuel 7, starting in verse 1, this is David talking. It says, "Now it came about when the king lived in his house and the Lord had given him rest on every side from all of his enemies, that the king said to Nathan the prophet, 'See now, I live in a house of cedar, but the ark of God remains within the tent.' And Nathan said to the king, 'Go do all that is in your mind, for the Lord is with you.' But in the same night, the very same night that Nathan said that, the word of God came to Nathan saying, 'Go and say to my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Should you build me a house for my dwelling? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt, even to this day. Rather, I have been moving about in a tent, that is, in a dwelling place. Wherever I have gone with all the sons of Israel, did I speak a word with one of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar?' Let me ask you a question. Who was the temple built for? Did God ask for it? We talked about this, right? Did God ask for it? No. And what happened to the tabernacle and the tent and all of that other stuff? And we talked about that. So let me ask you the final question here. What is important to God? Our faithfulness, our hearts. Yeah, all of this other stuff was just, that's the right question. What is important to God? That's the question that we need to ask. And so as we go into this last part, these questions, the questions are going to deal with some detail, but not the important things we just talked about, because that's the application I want you to get out of this. All the stuff about the gold and the hundreds of thousands of people that worked on it and all that, and that this was the greatest time ever for Israel, that's a worldly perspective. Yes, physically it may have been the greatest time, but under the surface, I want you to notice, and you're going to, as we get into next week, I want you to notice the rot at this point that is already developed under the surface, and it's going to cause the downfall. All right, so let's take a look at this construction. 150,000 skilled workers. What could you contrast this with in the New Testament? The idea of people working together and working on things together, is that a good thing? Is that necessary for the work of the church today? For people to be happily, free will, working together on a common project? Yes, absolutely it is. Yeah. Even the simplest work is needed for a task to be done. They're just these simple little jobs that look unimportant, but if you forget to put the screw in at the bottom, and you're the one that was supposed to put it in, and then you find out it's gone when the whole thing collapses on you. And yeah, and those are important things. So again, something very important for us. Question 2, the temple had to be constructed just as God had delivered the blueprint to David. Okay, so ultimately, even though it was David's idea, God let them go ahead with the idea. And then it became God's plan at that point, all right? And David was working through that because he was trying in this case to do the right thing, even though the original concept was way off, going way back, and so we just need to keep that in mind. But how important is it to follow God's instructions exactly as they're given? Francis?
Well, physically, as the temple was being constructed, none of these places had any idea how important their specific measurement was. And the rocks were hewed, and the timber was timbered, and everything, when it all came together, it fit.
Yeah, isn't that?
His whole life, as he dedicates to God, no matter what, when it comes together with other Christians that dedicate their life, it fits the way God wants the kingdom, the church to be.
Norm, did you hit the button already? Okay. Yeah, and Francis makes a really great point here. There was not, in the work of the temple, this is one of the unique things about it, there was not the sound of a hammer, of a nail going in, boards being moved, rocks being pulled. All of this was done off-site so that not a single sound would be made in the area of the temple. Now, just think about that. These huge rocks and all the detail and all the stuff, the metalworking and all that was all done off-site, and it just fit right in when it got there. That's an exact science right there. I challenge engineers today to try to put together something that would be done like that. That would be a real challenge. So, all right, we're going to be starting with question 3 about Hiram on next week. And these questions are going to be more in the way of a review because we talked about a lot of these already. And then we'll be getting into lesson 4. Lesson 4, the hard copies are in the back, and email copies Jason sent out already. All right, thank you for your attention.